Before the crown comes the crucifixion, and not everyone survives the ceremony. Let that sit for a second. Now here's something you probably weren't taught. Humiliation rituals are real. And no, we're not talking about school bullies, bad dates, or some zodiac meltdown. We're talking about spiritual ambushes, soul-level interrogations, and public executions of your character, dressed as jokes, corrections, or concern. Fact. In psychology, it's called gaslight triangulation, where you're isolated, discredited, and made the spectacle while the audience is applauding your breakdown. Sound familiar? Congratulations, chosen one. You've been through it, and you're still standing. But here's the twist nobody expected. You didn't just survive a humiliation ritual, you decoded it, you dissected it. You discerned your way out of a trap that was designed to bury you. Because the truth is, they never expected you to see the pattern. They thought your kindness was weakness. Your silence was ignorance. Your isolation was defeat. What they didn't know was that you were watching everything, like a spiritual sniper with a sense of humor and a soul they couldn't break. And if life was a Netflix special, that part where they all turned against you, that was the plot twist. This part right now is the rise of the one they tried to erase. Let's talk about it, in a way no one ever dared to before. Welcome to the truth they hoped you'd never say out loud. Number one, you weren't broken, you were being decoded. You weren't broken, you were being decoded. Most people think survival means you made it through something with just enough strength to limp to the other side. But when you were targeted, isolated, and humiliated, something deeper was happening. It wasn't just about surviving pain, it was about being stripped down to the original version of you before the world taught you to doubt yourself. That ritual didn't happen because you were weak, it happened because you carried something powerful that couldn't be controlled. And the only way they thought they could manage it was by publicly trying to dismantle you. But here's the twist, they didn't realize the breakdown was really a blueprint being revealed. Every attack, every betrayal, every moment of embarrassment wasn't breaking you. It was peeling off the false layers others had put on you. Their opinions, their fears, their insecurities. You were never meant to carry any of that. You were absorbing a frequency that didn't belong to you, just to fit into systems that secretly feared what would happen if you stood in your full truth. While it looked like failure or rejection from the outside, something sacred was happening underneath. You were being decoded back to your original form, the version of you that wasn't afraid to speak, to see, to call out what others keep silent. It's not just that you survived, it's that you saw the script they were running before they even said their lines. You began to see patterns instead of people, energy instead of words, intent instead of appearances, and that kind of clarity, it's dangerous in a world built on illusions. That's why they tried to destroy you. Not because you were fragile, but because you were finally becoming immune. And now they can't unsee what your presence revealed. You weren't broken, you were being reset, rewritten, revealed. Number two, they didn't want you dead. They wanted you obedient. They didn't want you dead. They wanted you obedient. What happened to you wasn't just some random emotional attack, it was calculated. Whether they realized it consciously or not, the goal wasn't to destroy your life. It was to make you shrink, to get you to doubt yourself so deeply that you'd fall in line, stop questioning things, and become easier to control. The humiliation wasn't an accident, it was a tactic. The public shaming, the subtle gaslighting, the fake concern dressed up as feedback. It was all designed to push you into a corner where you'd second-guess your instincts and hand over your power willingly. They weren't trying to wipe you out completely. No, they still wanted access to you, just not the bold, intuitive, fully awake version. They wanted the watered-down version of you. The easy-to-manipulate, the don't-ask questions, the keep the peace at your own expense version. That's who they could use. That's who fit into their agenda. But the real you, the one who sees through games, calls out hypocrisy and questions everything that doesn't sit right, that version was a threat. They needed you in survival mode, not in clarity, because people who are constantly doubting themselves are easier to lead, easier to silence. That's why they kept pushing, not to kill your spirit, but to control its direction. And when they saw you still standing, still thinking for yourself, still trusting your gut, that's when the fear kicked in. Not your fear, theirs. You surviving wasn't just physical, it was mental warfare. And your mind stayed intact. Your ability to discern, to decode the manipulation, to keep your soul aligned even while being publicly disrespected. That's what they didn't plan for. You were never meant to disappear. You were meant to be remade, not by them, but by truth. The moment you saw through their tactics, you reclaimed your freedom, and now they can't figure out how you slipped through the trap they built for you. Because you didn't just survive the ritual, you outsmarted it. Number 3, you weren't crazy, you were clairvoyant in a room of blind minds. You weren't crazy, you were clairvoyant in a room of blind minds. They made you question your sanity because you could sense what no one else would admit. You'd walk into a space and feel tension that hadn't even been spoken yet. You'd pick up on energy shifts, hidden motives, lies wrapped in smiles. And every time you tried to say something, you were made to feel like you were overreacting, like you were too sensitive or reading too much into things. But deep down, you knew exactly what you were seeing. You weren't imagining anything. You were perceiving what others were trained to ignore. The truth is, people are more comfortable with silence than with truth. And your awareness was unsettling to them. You called out things they were trying hard to suppress. You saw through the games, the masks, the performative kindness. That kind of insight makes people uncomfortable, especially the ones who benefit from confusion and silence. So they had to label you. Not because you were wrong, but because you were too right. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. You weren't spiraling, you were tracking. You noticed how people changed around certain energies. You caught the shifts in tone, the energy behind their words, the way their actions contradicted their image. That's not overthinking. That's divine intelligence in motion. Your mind wasn't malfunctioning. It was tuned to a frequency most people can't handle, let alone understand. They didn't know what to do with someone who didn't need proof to see the truth. That's why they tried to discredit you. But what they called crazy was actually clarity. What they dismissed as delusion was discernment. And the very things they used to mock you for, they secretly feared it. Because you were always 10 steps ahead. You knew what was coming before it arrived, and now they know too. You weren't imagining it, you were exposing it. Number 4, discernment is not positive vibes only. It's surgical precision. Discernment is not positive vibes only. It's surgical precision. People love to dress spirituality up in feel-good slogans. Just stay high vibe. Ignore the negativity. But that's not discernment, that's denial. Real discernment doesn't float above conflict with sage smoke and mantras. It cuts through the noise. It doesn't just feel energy, it dissects it. It sees beyond the surface into what's actually being said, actually being done, and most importantly, why. You didn't just walk into a room and pick up on someone's energy. You broke it down like a code. You watched body language, tone, timing. You listened to what wasn't said. You noticed how someone's eyes shifted when they lied, how they clapped too hard when you failed, how they smiled with their teeth but never their spirit. You didn't just sense bad vibes. You were running emotional forensics in real time. That's not just intuition, that's trained perception. The kind you earn by surviving betrayal, manipulation, and false love dressed in charm. You don't get that kind of discernment from quotes on a vision board, you get it from experience. From being misled so many times, you had to learn to separate energy from appearance. You knew when someone was love-bombing you to keep you close. You felt when someone praised you just enough to keep you compliant. You caught on when the flattery wasn't admiration. It was camouflage. That's why they called you cold, intense, difficult, even paranoid, because your spirit wasn't falling for the performance. It was scanning it, picking it apart, tracking the intent behind every gesture. And they hated that you saw it before they were ready to be exposed. You were the threat they didn't see coming, not because you were loud, but because you were accurate. Spiritual espionage isn't loud, it's quiet, sharp, surgical. And now they know you don't vibe check people, you soul scan them. Number 5. The ritual was their confession. The ritual was their confession. They didn't come out and say how they really felt about you. They didn't have to. Their actions told the whole truth. The silence, the mockery, the fake support that flipped the moment you stood in your power. That wasn't just abuse. That was a confession, a silent, involuntary spilling of everything they tried to hide behind politeness, titles, and smiles. The way they turned on you wasn't random. It was coordinated. Some were passive, others were loud, but they all played their role, and every single move they made was proof of something deeper. You made them uncomfortable without saying a word. The way you carried yourself, the way you questioned things they blindly accepted, the way your presence forced them to see their own lack of growth, it pierced them. And instead of facing that discomfort, They turned you into a target. The cruelty was the clearest truth they ever gave you. It showed you exactly where they stood. They weren't confused, they weren't hurt, they were threatened. And instead of admitting that, they tried to dress it up as concern, critique, or just being real, but it wasn't real, it was fear. Masked, rehearsed, and released in the form of group betrayal. What they didn't realize is that while they were performing their takedown, they were also exposing themselves. Every insult, every backhanded comment, every attempt to embarrass you in front of others was a tell. A flash of jealousy, a spike of envy, a desperate need to pull you down so they didn't have to rise up. Your soul echoed too loud in rooms built for echoes. You showed up as something different, unfiltered, aware, impossible to mold. And that terrified people who only know how to survive by copying each other. So the ritual wasn't just about you. It was their emotional fingerprint smeared all over your story. You didn't just survive abuse. You witnessed the moment their masks slipped, and your spirit stood still while theirs unraveled. Number 6, you were their mirror, and mirrors don't lie. You were their mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They didn't hate you. They hated what your presence revealed about them. You didn't even have to say much, just by existing the way you did. Clear, awake, unapologetically yourself, you exposed everything they were trying to suppress. You weren't attacking anyone, you were just being real, and that alone made people squirm, because while they were busy performing, you were being. While they played roles, you moved in truth. That kind of energy is disruptive in a room full of masks. You weren't arrogant, you were aligned, and that's what made you dangerous. They weren't offended by your flaws, they were offended by your freedom. You were the reminder of everything they gave up to be accepted. You were the version of themselves they abandoned to belong. And every time they looked at you, even silently, they saw what they could have been if they hadn't settled, if they had chosen truth over approval. So what did they do? They projected, tried to break the mirror, tried to call you too much, too intense, too sensitive, hoping that if they labeled you enough, they could silence what they couldn't stand to see. But deep down they knew it wasn't that you were wrong. It was that you were right. And that truth made their own reflection unbearable. They mistook your authenticity for arrogance, your discernment for judgment, your confidence for threat. But really all you did was shine light, not blinding light, just honest light. And when people have built their identities on illusion, that kind of clarity feels violent. You weren't trying to hurt anyone, you were just a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. That's why they tried to shatter you. Because if they could distort you, maybe they wouldn't have to face themselves. But even broken mirrors reflect truth. And every piece of you still showed them what they didn't want to see. And now they avoid your eyes. Not because you changed, but because you still see them. Number 7. You didn't escape it. You transcended. You didn't escape. You transcended. There's a difference. Escape means you ran. It means you barely made it, that you were lucky or just fast enough to avoid the blow. But what you did, that wasn't luck, that was evolution. You didn't just leave the chaos, you outgrew it. While they were still playing roles in a rigged system, trying to win approval, climb invisible ladders and impress people who secretly resented them, you were already done with the whole game. You saw the system for what it was, a maze designed to keep people distracted, competing, and disconnected from themselves. They still talk about you because they're still in it, still lost in the drama, still stuck in the same cycle, still needing to bring your name up just to feel something real. That's not power. That's proof they never moved on. But you stopped playing altogether. You didn't just reject the game, you burned the rule book, walked off the board and became someone they no longer knew how to define. Transcendence is not always beautiful. It's not a soft glow and peaceful meditations. It's messy. It's isolating, it's painful, it's losing everything that made you feel safe and still choosing growth over comfort. It's realizing you're the villain in their story simply because you stopped needing their validation to breathe. That kind of shift doesn't come with applause, it comes with silence, distance, misunderstanding, but it also comes with freedom. You didn't just walk away from them. You walked away from needing to explain yourself, from shrinking, from dimming your light just to be palatable. That wasn't an exit. That was a full-blown ascension, not spiritual aesthetics, not manifestation quotes, real survival strategy, internal rewiring, mental clarity, soul-level rebellion. And now they watch from the same place you left, confused, bitter, and wondering how you got free without asking for permission, because you didn't escape, you transcended. Number 8, your silence wasn't powerful, it was strategic warfare. Your silence wasn't powerful, it was strategic warfare. Let's be clear, you weren't sitting quietly because you were afraid, confused, or trying to be the bigger person. That wasn't submission, it was observation. You weren't humble, you were calculating, listening, reading between the lines, letting people talk long enough to hang themselves with their own contradictions. While they assumed you were too stunned to respond, you were collecting data. Who switched up, who stood by, who smiled while sharpening knives. They thought your silence meant weakness, but really you were watching the entire board, studying the moves and letting them reveal themselves without lifting a single finger. That's not meekness, that's cold precision. You weren't out of words, you were just past the point where words could be wasted. You knew that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is say nothing and let people expose themselves in real time. Every lie they told about you, every whisper, every sideways glance, all of it became evidence. You didn't need to defend yourself because you understood something they didn't. People who move with truth don't panic when lies are told. They observe, they archive, they wait. You knew exactly who you were. That's why you didn't flinch when the rumors started or the betrayal unfolded. You knew the storm would pass and leave receipts behind. Because the thing about silent people is this: they don't just watch, they remember. And when it's time, they rise with proof, peace, and clarity, while the people who thought they won scramble to rewrite history. So no, your silence wasn't poetic or passive. It was a tactical advantage. You weren't retreating. You were getting still, sharpening your discernment, tuning into what couldn't be said out loud, preparing your next move with surgical focus. And when the dust settled, you were 10 steps ahead, because that wasn't silence, that was strategy. Number 9, you didn't get lucky, you were coded to survive traps they built for others. You didn't get lucky, you were coded to survive traps they built for others. They planned it like they'd done it before. Same formula, same manipulation, same blueprint of silent sabotage dressed up as concern. It worked on others. People who questioned themselves just enough to comply, who gave in when the pressure built, who shrank to avoid the shame. So when it was your turn, they expected the same result. Break you down, humiliate you, watch you fold. But you didn't. And that's where they miscalculated. Because what they didn't know was that your entire being was built differently. You were born with encrypted armor, strength encoded in your spirit that even you didn't fully understand until they tried to break it. The attacks weren't generic. They were precise, tailored, designed to hit where it would hurt you the most. But what they couldn't account for was the resilience hidden beneath your surface, the way your soul could absorb impact, reroute pain, and use it as fuel. This wasn't survival by accident. It was embedded in your blueprint. You didn't just resist, you transformed through it. While they were busy trying to destroy your character, you were evolving under pressure. And that kind of growth, it doesn't come from luck. It comes from divine design. The humiliation was curated to unravel you, public enough to isolate you, subtle enough to make others question you. But you didn't react how they predicted. You observed, you recalibrated, you processed the pain, then transmuted it. They thought they were weakening you, but the ritual activated parts of you they weren't prepared to face. A level of clarity, power, and awareness that made you untouchable. You were never meant to crumble. You were wired to withstand storms engineered by systems that feed off collapse. And now, they're left stunned, replaying every move, trying to figure out why it didn't work. It didn't work because you weren't built for their trap. You were born as the glitch in their entire system. Number 10, they laughed at you publicly because they feared you privately. They laughed at you publicly because they feared you privately. Let that sink in. The performance, the jokes at your expense, the smirks, the fake concern turned sarcasm. None of it was confidence. It was fear in disguise. Desperation pretending to be dominance. Because people who are truly secure in themselves don't need to humiliate others to feel powerful. What they did to you wasn't about humor or truth. It was a spectacle, a staged ritual to make themselves feel bigger in the presence of someone who made them feel small without even trying. The louder they laughed, the more exposed they felt. You triggered something deep, not because you were loud, but because you were centered. You didn't need the spotlight to feel valuable. You didn't beg for validation. You weren't playing the game, and that made you unpredictable. And when people can't control you, they try to discredit you, especially in front of an audience, because a group laugh gives weak spirits the illusion of power. Like if they can turn the crowd against you, they won't have to face their own reflection. But you didn't break, you didn't beg, you didn't match their energy. You kept your composure when everything in the room was trying to strip it from you, and that shook them more than any words ever could. Your dignity was the loudest protest in the room. It said, "I know who I am, even when you don't." You didn't play the victim. You didn't retaliate with chaos. You stood in silence, not because you were defeated, but because you refused to descend. And now, long after the laughter has died and the attention has shifted, they're still haunted by how you held your ground. That calm wasn't weakness, it was power. It reminded them that real strength doesn't need an audience. It doesn't scream, it doesn't flinch. They laughed to protect their egos. You stood still to protect your soul. And in the end, only one of those things survived with integrity. Number 11, your discernment was forged in betrayal, not meditation. Your discernment was forged in betrayal, not meditation. People love to romanticize wisdom like it comes from peaceful retreats, journaling in the sunlight, or sipping tea in quiet reflection, but your insight didn't come dressed in soft colors and serenity. It came from survival, from gut punches you didn't see coming, from nights you couldn't sleep because your intuition was screaming while everyone around you told you to calm down. Your discernment wasn't gifted, it was forced out of you through pain. You didn't learn who was real by reading quotes. You learned by watching people shift when they thought you had nothing left to offer. You learned by sitting in rooms where the energy felt off and finding out later why. You earned your instincts the hard way, by ignoring them, getting burned, and vowing to never make that mistake again. That kind of clarity isn't cute, it's carved. You bled for your awareness, through backhanded compliments, through people who swore they had your back until it was time to prove it, through betrayal so calculated you had to replay every conversation just to catch the moment they flipped. And when you confronted them, they called it a misunderstanding, as if patterns lie, as if intuition doesn't remember tone, timing, and truth. No, you didn't come to your power through softness. You came through war. The whispers you trusted turned into warnings. The storms they said were random were actually rehearsed. And your heart? It didn't harden. It refined. It stopped giving unlimited access and started listening to frequency, not words. You don't look at people the same anymore, not because you're bitter, but because now you see what they carry, not just what they show. That's not paranoia, that's precision, that's earned awareness. And it didn't come from sitting still in a peaceful room, it came from standing still in chaos and not losing yourself. Your discernment is a scar, not a souvenir, and it speaks louder than any apology they'll never have the courage to give. Number 12, you became sacred because you were once scapegoated. You became sacred because you were once scapegoated. They didn't choose you because you were weak. They chose you because you were visible, because you had presence, clarity, depth, and that made you the perfect target. In a group where no one wants to take accountability, the person who holds truth becomes the threat. So they painted you as the problem, the difficult one, the unstable one. Not because it was true, but because it was easier than facing themselves. They couldn't look inward, so they looked for someone to throw their shadows on. And you became the screen they projected their unhealed wounds onto. You carried blame that wasn't yours, absorbed tension that didn't belong to you, and endured exile from people who couldn't even be honest with themselves. All because you represented what they weren't ready to confront. Being scapegoated isn't just being excluded. It's being stripped of your narrative while others rewrite it for their comfort. It's standing alone while everyone pretends your silence means guilt. And still, through all of that, you didn't shatter, you burned. Quietly, painfully, but with purpose. And in that fire, something sacred formed, because surviving false narratives teaches you something no book or guru can. It teaches you spiritual autonomy. It teaches you who you are without approval. It carves clarity into your bones. And eventually it makes you untouchable, not because you fought back louder, but because you refused to become what they said you were. You didn't just survive their projections. You transmuted them. You turned every false accusation into deeper discernment, every exile into elevation, every betrayal into inner structure. They tried to reduce you, but in doing so, they refined you, and now you walk with a kind of holiness that didn't come from rituals or robes. It came from fire. Not everyone understands it. That's fine. You weren't made to be understood. You were made to be remembered. Number 13. The same mouths that cursed you are now echoing your voice. The same mouths that cursed you are now echoing your voice. It's wild how the very people who tried to discredit you are now mirroring your energy, your style, your tone, your exact phrasing, recycled like it was theirs all along. You watch it happen in real time. They mock you in private, but mimic you in public. They used to roll their eyes at your ideas, your boldness, your originality. Now they're dressed in it, tweeting it, branding themselves with what they once called too much, weird or fake deep. They didn't want to understand you. They wanted to contain you. When that didn't work, they tried to delete you, pretend you were irrelevant, say you changed, say you lost it. But what they really meant was, you evolved beyond our comfort zone and we couldn't keep up. So they threw dirt on your name, hoping it would bury you. What they didn't realize was that dirt was compost. It made your roots deeper, your growth more unstoppable. Now they're choking on your language, trying to reshape your presence into something palatable for them. But here's the thing. Copies never carry the weight of the original. They can imitate your look, your cadence, your structure, but they can't clone your essence. They don't have your why. They didn't earn it the way you did, through real fire, real loss, real self-reconstruction. They're wearing your skin without surviving your storms, and deep down, they know it. That's why they don't give credit. That's why it feels forced when it comes from them. Because what you did, the way you transformed pain into purpose, silence into impact, it wasn't performance, it was alchemy. They tried to erase you, but all they did was highlight how unforgettable you truly are. They didn't destroy your legacy, they accidentally amplified it. Number 14, you were the ritual breaker, not the victim. You were the ritual breaker, not the victim. They thought they were disciplining you, teaching you a lesson, making an example out of you so no one else would dare step out of line. What they didn't expect was that you were the line, the boundary, the interruption, the shift. They weren't just coming for your name. They were reenacting a pattern, a generational ritual of silencing the ones who see too clearly, feel too deeply, and refuse to follow blindly. But this time the pattern hit something it couldn't swallow. You. They tried the usual tactics. Shame, isolation, gaslighting, public mockery. The same emotional playbook used on people before you, maybe even on people in your own family, your bloodline, your community. It always worked before. But this time it cracked, because you didn't collapse, you didn't conform, you stood in it. And that stance, that quiet refusal to fold, was revolutionary. They were expecting a meltdown. You gave them a metamorphosis. What was meant to break you became your initiation. You didn't just walk through the fire. You took the matchbook with you so it couldn't be used on anyone else. The spell broke because you didn't. Because somewhere in your soul, something ancient and knowing rose up and said, no more. You didn't even fully know what you were doing at the time. You just knew what not to become, and that was enough. Now the cycle can't repeat the same way. The pattern has a crack in it because someone saw it for what it was and survived it with their spirit intact. That someone is you. You weren't just surviving humiliation. You were rewriting the outcome. And they'll never be able to explain how their ritual turned into your awakening because they cast the curse. But you carried the cure. So now what? Now you understand. They weren't just trying to break you. They were trying to break the frequency you carry, the clarity you walk in, the truth you represent just by breathing. It was never about one moment of humiliation or one person's betrayal. It was about silencing the kind of soul that threatens systems built on fear, delusion, and performance. You were never just a person to them. You were a disruption, a walking contradiction to the lies they told themselves to sleep at night. And still, you rose, not with noise, but with knowing, not with revenge, but with reconstruction. You didn't play their game. You built a whole new arena. You didn't fight for your name. You became a name they can't speak without remembering their failure to erase it. They'll call it ego, but you know better. This isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that they never held the power to define you in the first place. Every smear, every exile, every forced silence was just confirmation of your spiritual weight. You weren't just targeted, you were identified as the one who could see what others couldn't, carry what others collapsed under, and live what others only pretend to preach. And now? Now you walk differently, with the poise of someone who knows they were designed to survive what was sent to destroy them, with the posture of someone who's already paid in full, with the grace of someone who doesn't need to clap back. Because the echo of your endurance says it all. Let them talk, let them mimic, let them circle back pretending they never participated. You're no longer in that room, that timeline, that matrix. You broke the cycle, not just for you, but for everyone who'll come after you and feel your silent permission to choose truth over acceptance, discernment over performance, freedom over fear. You are not who they said you were. You are who they feared you'd become. And now that you have, don't look back, not even to wave. If this message stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your strength, your clarity, or your survival, don't just scroll away. This space was built for people like you. The ones who see deeper, feel harder, and rise stronger. So do me one solid thing and do it for you. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another truth that hits different. Like this video if it spoke to your spirit, not your ego. Drop a comment and let me know. What part hit the hardest? Your story might be the permission someone else needs. Share this with someone who's in the fire right now and needs to know. The ritual ends when they don't break. This isn't just content, it's spiritual ammunition. So stay tapped in, because this is where the real ones gather.